Did the Catholic Church boot Martin Luther, or did he leave of his own accord? Today, we find out. Depending on who you talk to, the Protestant Reformation is either the most catastrophic or the most heroic event ever to happen in the Christian faith. One thing we can all agree on is that it changed the face of Christianity, and its effects resonate today. So, Martin Luther famously nailed his 95 Theses on the door of the Wittenberg University Cathedral, criticising the sale of indulgences and other matters of theology, and the Catholic Church kicked him out, right? Well, it wasn't quite that simple. Firstly, we're not even sure the whole nailing to the doorkeeper actually took place. Historians are still debating that, and in reality it's kind of irrelevant. He definitely wrote the 95 Theses, he definitely sent them to his superiors, they definitely got him in trouble, and they definitely led to the breakup of the church. But he wrote the Theses in 1517, and didn't officially get excommunicated, kicked out of the church, until 1521. What happened in those 4 forgotten years? I'm so very glad you asked. At first he was ignored. Yep, nothing really happened. Old Martin wanted a debate, and nobody would give it to him, and it would have stayed that way were it not for the invention of the printing press. You see, prior to Gutenberg's movable type printing press, each copy of a document had to be handwritten, and so there were very few copies of books printed. The printing press meant that thousands of copies of the Theses could be made relatively cheaply, and that they were. A few humanist academics, impressed by Luther's lectures on the topic of indulgences, rattled off a bunch of copies and sent them around Europe. Folks started paying attention. One such folk was the Archbishop of Mainz. He was less than impressed. He sent a copy to Pope Leo X, along with a fairly grumpy letter demanding action. Pope Leo X was far too busy emptying the church treasury on parties to be concerned with such a minor issue, and considered it a small and insignificant incident. He asked Cardinal Cajetan, the head of the Dominican order, to please write a private letter to dear Martin and ask him to please pipe down. He didn't. In fact, the letter increased his resolve. This will become a bit of a theme. He published his resolution on the virtue of indulgences, repeating his claims. Well, didn't that annoy the cardinal? Cajetan summoned Luther to a debate which was to occur in Augsburg, Germany, after being moved from Rome for Luther's convenience. A debate, thought Luther. This is exactly what I wanted in the first place. Smashing! By now a year has passed. It's October 1518. But when he arrived, far from a debate, he got a fatherly scolding. Cardinal Cajetan lectured Luther on matters of church doctrine as if he were simply a wayward monk. Well, while Cajetan's understanding of church teaching was correct, he failed to recognise that Luther was considered an expert theologian, so speaking down to him just angered Luther further. Tired of being dismissed, Luther did not recant. It's important to note at this point that Luther didn't want to break with the church, and the church did not want to lose him. Luther even wrote to the Pope saying just this. Nobody could have imagined what was to come. But, you see, the church was so involved in politics in Europe that any challenge to the church was also a political act. As such, quite a few supporters egged him on for financial reasons, encouraging him to further develop his theology. Luther was finally invited to have a real public debate in June of 1519. By this stage, enough time had passed that he was certainly not backing down. At Leipzig in Germany, he debated many people, including Johann Eck, this fella. And Eck forced Luther to explain his ideas more thoroughly than he had ever done before, to the point where he directly opposed fundamental church teaching. He dismissed papal authority, the role of councils, and even the New Testament epistle of James at one point. He clearly expressed his belief in the idea of justification by faith alone, without any role for free will. Germany started to divide between those who supported Luther, for a variety of reasons, and those who backed the church. By June of the next year, the matter had come to a head. Pope Leo, a man not really fit for this challenge, was forced to act. He issued a papal bull, meaning an official announcement from the Pope, called Exsurge Domine. It demanded that Luther recant, take back his teachings, or be excommunicated, booted from the church. So, Luther took it all back and they all sat down for a nice cup of tea. No! There were too many backers behind Luther now. Luther took his copy of the papal bull and publicly burnt it in a bonfire. The next day he said that this was only symbolic because it was really the Pope who should have been burnt. He then happily published a pamphlet called Against the Bull of the Antichrist, clearly likening the Pope to the evil one. Surely the Church will just excommunicate him for this. Nope. One more chance, buddy. The new 19-year-old Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, took over and summoned Luther, who now led a disturbingly big movement, to answer him at the confusingly named Diet of Worms. Diet means assembly and Worms is a city in Germany. This was January 1521, fully 3.5 years after the theses were written. Luther was asked once more to recant and he refused. Automatically excommunicated, Charlie gave him 24 hours safe passage with a warning that if he hung about he would be executed. So scurry off, fella. Often we forget that the Church gave Luther 6 chances to recant, and that Luther never truly wanted to split with Rome. Had Cajetan responded in a more humble tone, perhaps catastrophe would have been averted. Perhaps, as the 500th anniversary of this event draws near, we might seek to find a way to mend what was broken.